An interesting weekend of Christmas football. We had some snoozers of games. We've had some playoff clinchers. We've had some teams eliminated from playoff contention and some teams that are kind of still in it with 2 weeks to play. Everything going on. Week 16 of the NFL season coming up right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson, as always, at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL on Twitter. Hit us with your Wednesday mailbag questions for this week. We've got an extra special best of episode coming at you tomorrow, but we had to get you here, even though I'm still on holiday and I'm away from my home studio. We had to get you the recap from the weekend of football that was week 16, some Christmas Eve, some Christmas games, very interesting scores, and some storylines that are now building here into the end of the season with some playoff hopes on the line. And I want to start with, and we got to get to the Vikings that just keep winning these games, these one-score games, and the 61-yard field goal to win it. But I want to start with a different idea here. And it was a bad football game. Let's be honest. A couple of really bad ones on Christmas Day, in fact, with the Rams blowout 51-14 over the Broncos. And the Broncos are just playing the worst. Like, I can't believe what's going on with the Denver Broncos right now. Like, it is so bad. But the late game was also bad, but it was at least close and went into overtime with the Buccaneers hanging on, winning 19-16, Matt. Now you have a 7-8 Buccaneers team looking good to get into that playoffs. It was going to be, it would have actually been, if they didn't win that game in overtime, it would have been the 6-9 Panthers that actually led with tiebreakers in the NFC South. But when you see a team like the Cowboys that won on Christmas Eve, 40-34 over the Eagles, the Cowboys 11-4. Do you think it's time to start to relook at the seeding of things in the playoffs and say, well, okay, if you win the division, you're in the playoffs, but can you have a team that's got 9 losses hosting a 12-win Cowboys team?
Yeah, let me get that in 1 second. I just want to kind of preface this by we haven't talked to our fans, for our listeners, for a while. Hope everyone had a wonderful holiday weekend, spent a lot of time with their family, as did I. I'm playing catch up a little bit. You know, we had people here all afternoon and evening yesterday, so I'm doing the best I can, try to digest all these games, but I'm doing all right. A couple themes, though, obviously, from the weekend, kind of like you said, but there were quite a few fringe playoff teams that all seemed to lose. You know, the Jets, the Patriots, the Lions, on and on and on, that all of a sudden teams like the Packers are back in it, maybe, you know, some of these stalwart teams. And then, of course, weather was a massive theme of the weekend. And I found this quote on the 33rds website by Joe Thomas referencing Saints Browns. By the way, the Saints handled the weather better than the Browns. That's a side note. But Joe Thomas said, I've lived 27 years in Wisconsin, 11 years in Cleveland, spent a lot of time ice fishing in northern Wisconsin. Never have I been in temperatures that felt so cold, and referencing the Browns game this week. You know, like, it's a little crazy, and it's a leveling the playing field situation. So back to your question. I have mixed feelings about this because I hate when superior teams when the best 7 don't get in, which almost happens every year. Like, if you could handpick the 7 you want to see as a fan, as an analyst, rarely is it the same 7 that go from each respective conference. But having been in those buildings, and I tell this story all the time, Phil Savage and Romeo Crennel took over as the Browns GM and coach and fired me and many others shortly after. But we would start every draft meeting as one of the worst, if not the worst team in the league, saying, how do we beat the Steelers? You know, so much preparation, because the Steelers were top of the division. So much preparation year round for these teams is, how do I win my division? And if you don't reward them for doing so, even if it's a 6-win team, I have a problem with that too.
And I get the idea of division rivalries, and
Sure.
that takes so much away from it, and winning the division wouldn't matter. I think maybe the way to go about it would be potentially if you throw the division winning thing out if you're not 500. Like maybe that's just a
Maybe.
stipulation where it's like, okay, if you win the division and you're 500, now you're hosting playoff games, right?
See, but I was cooler with that when there were 16 games. But 8 and 9 I can live with.
He's one game under, right? Which is where the Buccaneers could be at 7-8 now. It
Yeah.
would have looked a lot worse with a team that was 6-9.
Oh.
That at best, talking about a 10-loss team probably would be one of those teams winning the division. It still could be with
Yeah.
with the teams in the NFC South. But just the Cowboys with their record too. There's such a big difference between. Like, what if it was
No
okay?
doubt.
If you win your division, you're guaranteed a playoff spot, but you reseed based on record for the whole playoffs.
I was about to suggest that. We've been doing this a while together. I kind of like that. That these are the 7 that go in, 4 division winners, and the most qualified wild card teams. And then we're going to seed you 1 to 7, kind of like the NCAA bracket. You know, how we see fit, or mathematically. I mean, it's not going to be votes, but mathematically. And just because you win the division doesn't mean you host a game. I like that.
I I was blown away watching that game Sunday night, the last game of Christmas Day, with the Buccaneers winning in overtime 19-16, and the Trace McSorley led Cardinals was bad football.
Oh,
But the Tom Brady led Buccaneers were just as bad. Like that was I'm watching that game. It's like, you're telling me one of these teams gonna be in the playoffs? They were awful.
oh
They were
man.
both awful. That was not a good football game. And it was just sort of setting in the whole time I'm watching this game. These teams should not be in the playoffs, and certainly shouldn't be hosting the Cowboys.
100%. I mean, Tampa's got big problems that aren't getting fixed. They don't run the ball well. They're bad on first downs. They get no explosive plays. Their O line's a disaster. I still picked them to win because all the bad things going on around the Cardinals. And I want to give Arizona a little bit of credit in that they're on their third quarterback. Their GM is gone. There's all kinds of bad things going. They played hard. They easily could have cashed this thing in and rolled over and on Christmas Day and said the heck with it. They're just not good. They're a
Yeah.
top 5 drafting type of team, where the Bucks are going to be one and done. I know some teams. I know a lot of analysts are lumping like Brady and Rodgers together and just punch your ticket, just get in the show, and then look out for those guys. Green Bay is 1,000 times better than Tampa Bay, by the way, but Tampa's not beating Dallas in round 1.
I don't think anything else needs to be said about the 51-14 thumping of the Broncos by the Rams, except for
Embarrassing.
yeah, embarrassing for the Broncos and the Rams. It's like, okay, showing some spunk here at the end of the season with, it's they're a lot, their quarterback, at least, on the sideline, very important player there. And it was a team that didn't, that we knew wasn't going to go anywhere. They're out of things, but showing some signs of life late in the season, which is nice for them going into next year. But the Broncos are a disaster. They're embarrassing. A really good one on the early game, though, Sunday, which was the Packers beating the Dolphins 26-20. And you mentioned how at 7-8 now the Packers aren't completely out of this thing and are fighting for one of those potential wild card spots and really getting hot at the right time late in the year if they can get in and, maybe do a little damage in the playoffs, because they still got some talent on both sides of the ball. And it was the Dolphins with a lead at halftime that were shut out in the second half of that game and didn't score again after scoring 20 points in the first half at 8-7, which also allowed the Buffalo Bills to clinch the AFC East. So congratulations to the Buffalo Bills, who beat the Bears 35-13 and clinched the AFC East this year. They're now 12-3, kind of bouncing around a little bit here with some of these scores, but when you look at that Packers team and beating the Dolphins, and I think that was a lot more telling than the overtime game Sunday night with two teams. It's like,
Yes.
okay, these are two teams that are playoff caliber, and they played a good game. They played a close game, and the Dolphins were just better earlier in the year. But you could see how there's two teams that maybe could beat somebody in the playoffs. But I don't think I saw enough from either one of these teams throughout the year or on Christmas Day that would make me say I'm kind of scared to play them in the playoffs, though, either.
Yeah, this is a big game because, Tua, I mean, it's particularly for Tua. He has those 2 really rough games. Then he goes to Buffalo and loses, but played better. And then the first half, he was great, hitting Waddle late and all that. And then just a Tua collapse. 4 turnovers, 3 interceptions by Miami in a game that they averaged 8.4 yards per play as opposed to 4.6 for Green Bay. They lost this game as much as Green Bay won it. that being said, the Packers were my fantasy D to draft this year. They have first round picks everywhere. They're going to be the steal of fantasy drafts. They stunk all year. And I think they're starting to round into shape a little bit on that side of the ball. And my biggest takeaway was a while back, I made some waves saying Dak Prescott's the best quarterback in the NFC. It's probably still Rodgers. He's still a star, like boring, but it's probably still Rodgers.
I don't think it's any coincidence either that the emergence of their highly drafted wide receiver in Christian Watson
Right.
has also been the emergence of, Rodgers playing better, the team playing better, the offense playing better for the Packers. I just been still disappointed about their defense. And even this one in the first half, that their defense has too many talented players. And I think that could even be the shakeup for the Packers this offseason. If Rodgers sticks around, maybe it's a defensive coordinator switch there, because I think it's been unacceptable with what the Packers defense has done this year based on the talent that was there. We should be talking about them as, one of the best 2-3 defenses in the NFL. And they haven't been that.
Yeah, I expected it. Just on paper, they should be a top handful, for sure. Every first round picks on defense. I mean, except for Jordan Love. We'll get into this later in the week, but they're favored hosting the Vikings, and then they host the Lions. Like, they're far from dead. Like, I look at them in Tampa much differently. If Green Bay gets in the show, they could beat a Dallas. They could beat your Niners, possibly. I mean, they're a little bit dangerous. Tampa, to me, is not dangerous at all.
Yes, 100% agreed. Okay, some other teams that might be a little dangerous in the playoffs. We'll talk playoff implications. We'll talk Christmas Eve, Christmas Day football from Week 16 next. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy. You are maybe sitting around a little bored. People are on vacation. You're on vacation. You want to get into the game a little bit, right? Well, play some daily fantasy sports, especially if you're not in your year-long fantasy playoffs anymore in the NFL. All you do is you pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on that entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Doesn't take a lot of time. It could not be simpler to play daily fantasy with Prize Picks either. You don't have to draft an entire team. You're only picking those 2 to 5 players, and you're only picking them against the projections at Prize Picks if they will score more or less than those projections. And it's not just NFL either. And of course, you can play NFL, maybe, Monday night or any day of the week. And you want to pick some projections for the NFL weekend. But there is NBA, there is PGA golf, there is college sports, college football, bowl season, college basketball, men's and women's. There is esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, tons, even cricket and disc golf. If that's what you're into, you can find tons of projections available at Prize Picks to play daily fantasy sports. Make those selections and entries in less than 60 seconds. It's that easy. Safe and fast withdrawals, which are also easy and currently operational in over 30 states, including Canada. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com, sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Thanks again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen today and every day. Make sure you check out Locked On Sports today as well. The biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's Take of the Day. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. The Bills were down at halftime.
Yeah.
And this is so there's 2 takeaways with this game. One is that when the Bears get some talent and Justin Fields continues to develop, he's already a problem. And he's so competitive. And it's fun to watch that game, even though the Bears are 3-12 and they're out of it. It was still a really interesting game and fun to watch. And you see Josh Allen making a couple mistakes, and he's still prone to make a couple throws where you're like, come on, Josh Allen, what are you doing? You're a top 2 quarterback in the NFL. What are you doing making that throw? And so the Bears have a lead at halftime. And then the other takeaway is, oh, yeah, but then Josh Allen can do that and throw up 30 points in the second half on a team and roll you too. And so there's sort of like the 2 sides of the coin there for the Buffalo Bills. And the Bears obviously can't do anything about it at that point because they're like, oh, well, we got figured out and we don't have the pieces to compete with this Josh Allen in the second half. So, a story of 2 halves definitely in this game. And it's all about the future for the Chicago Bears. It's all about the now for the Buffalo Bills at 12-3, winning the AFC East. But Josh Allen can't be making those mistakes and getting behind against playoff teams.
No, 100%. Bills defense played really well. All the Bears games seem to go the right way for them in that, boy, I'm seeing a lot of good stuff, but we still got the loss. So we're going to pick second overall. Maybe if Houston wins another one, we can get the first, and then we could trade that for a bounty. Somebody wants a quarterback or take Will Anderson, something like that. So the future looks very bright. The foundation's being built. Looks like they have a coach, an offense coordinator, a quarterback, and they play hard. So that's great for the Bears. And I equate them often to, that basketball team, like around here, Duquesne's an okay program, but then they play North Carolina and the first half's kind of tight, and then North Carolina brings three 5 stars off the bench, and you just can't go for 60 minutes. I mean, that's who the Bears are right now. Bills defense is really good. I have no worries about the D, except the D line depth with Von Miller out worries me big picture. But these Josh Allen turnovers, especially in the other team's end, that it could be points,
Right.
worry me a little. I did want to mention James Cook, though. I mean, he is starting to emerge a little later than I expected. One of my favorite dynasty rookies coming out too.
Nice weapon in the playoffs to have if they need to lean on that, and give Josh Allen an outlet so he doesn't have to make the hero ball throws and make mistakes too. So that's kind of a mindset thing for Josh Allen. And the other part of it is, don't get yourself hit, don't get yourself hurt, Josh Allen. And if we've got someone like James Cook in the game, you can dump it off. You don't have to make the hero ball throw and throw that interception.
Yeah, I mean, he only threw for 172 yards. Fine, didn't have to do much at the end. Lean on the running game, especially with a lead. Okay, I can buy that formula.
Interesting one here with the Panthers beating the Lions Christmas Eve 37-23, Matt. The Panthers improved to 6-9 on the season. They're 4-1 with interim head coach Wilkes now. And the Lions really hurts their opportunity to sneak into the playoffs. And they're suddenly tied now with the Packers at 7-8 records. Both still have an opportunity, but it would have been really nice for the Lions to be 8-7 instead of 7-8 right now. So big loss for the Lions in their fight to get into the playoffs. And the Panthers, again, like I mentioned earlier in the show, if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers didn't pull that out in overtime on Christmas evening, the Panthers would have that tiebreaker currently and would be leading the NFC South at 6-9. And now they will not be leading the NFC South because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won that. But as we know, over the course of the next 2 games, they can still win a couple of games and get into this thing at 8-9 if they win out and the Buccaneers lose a football game. So your thoughts on this game with the Panthers, with the Lions, and where those teams stand here in their fight for a playoff berth in 2022?
Yeah, fanboy Matt would have liked to see the Lions in the playoffs. That looks less likely now. That's unfortunate. But I also wanted to see the Panthers win their division, and always comes back to Steelers. Last week, the Steelers played the Panthers, so I really dug into this team. And as you've been saying for years, I like a lot of their defensive pieces, but the offense is, you have to stop their running game. It's not a real diverse running game. They run the same plays down your throat over and over. And hey, give Steve Wilkes credit, by the way. And oh my God, did they do that to the Lions? I mean, I think they had well over 200 yards rushing in the first half. I mean, this game was over from the beginning. I mean, Foreman and Chuba went for 165 and 125. And Darnold actually is playing kind of good, well enough that he might be a spot starter with the type dude. I'm interested in Darnold and Mayfield, how the league views those guys in free agency. Not that they're going to ever regain the promise they once had, but they're NFL players. So this was all about stopping the run. Everyone on the planet knew what was going to happen, and the Lions couldn't stop it. And they just ran the same plays over and over down their throat.
Yes, that Lions defense is still not ready. They got to do some work in the offseason if they don't get in, or if they do get in, because I don't think they'll last against some of these teams in the playoffs because of that reason. And look, we're talking about a lot of teams and a lot of tiebreaker scenarios that are coming up here. But I think in the end, a lot of teams that don't quite have it. And I thought the Lions might be that team, but maybe it's actually the Packers when you look at it. Okay, how you're built, how much talent is on your roster top to bottom. The team that, because there's that team that kind of makes a run and sneaks in with a wild card and all of a sudden is trouble in the playoffs, probably in the NFC looking more like the Packers is that team after all out of nowhere, and not the Lions or, the Commanders or the Seahawks.
Yeah, I agree. And some of that's starting to really come to the forefront, the Patriots for real, or the Lions for real, the Jets for real, or Miami for real. I mean, even some teams that will get in are struggling at the wrong time.
Matt, do you have the schedule grid in front of you right now?
No, but I will pull it up very quickly because I often
pull it
do.
up. next, because I want to talk a couple tiebreakers here and
Okay.
talk about a couple of games, a couple of teams. The Seahawks lost to the Chiefs, what that means, and where those tiebreakers are heading into the last couple of weeks for some of those NFC and AFC playoff spots next. Let me lay out a scenario for you. And this happens often in the holidays. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks, and a few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end, people start to head out, and you think, I'm just call for a ride, right? No, you live nearby. You can make it home. You're okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds that you'll get pulled over anyway, right? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? But your insurance goes up. You lose your license. Maybe you total your car. Maybe you kill somebody, because that's how this could end sometimes is deadly. And everyone knows the risks of driving drunk, and it is not worth it. Don't even take your vehicle if you know you're going to be out drinking, especially during the holidays. Leave your car at home. Make those plans so you have no choice at the end of the night but to make a smart decision, which is the only decision you leave yourself with, which is getting that ride home and not driving under the influence. That's why police are going to be out there heavy during the holidays, especially New Year's. Be smart about it. They're looking for impaired drivers on our roads. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again, play it safe and plan ahead, or get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Okay, Matt. So looking at the Seahawks loss, let's talk NFC here real quick and finish this up. With the Seahawks losing 24-10 to the Chiefs, the Chiefs have clinched now the AFC West. The Seahawks at 7-8 on the season still have some tiebreakers. We're looking at the Commanders, who lost 37-20 to the 49ers. The 49ers are just absolutely rolling right now. And I'm kind of blown away every week by what Brock Purdy is doing, and that 49ers defense doing a number on every single team they face. The Commanders at 7-7-1. So looking at the playoff picture right now, it would still be Giants with the 6 seed at 8-6-1. The Commanders with the 7 seed at 7-7-1. They both have that half game, which helps them. The Seattle Seahawks at 7-8 would be the 8 seed, but they have the tiebreakers over some of these teams. So Seattle wins the tiebreaker over Detroit based on head-to-head win percentage. That was the, 48-45 game or something earlier on this year, which Seattle beat Detroit. So that's big with Detroit. So that makes it tough for Detroit, especially against the Seahawks.
Detroit's in trouble.
Yes. So division tiebreak was initially used to eliminate Green Bay. Detroit wins the tiebreaker over Green Bay based on head-to-head win percentage, but you have the schedule grid up, and I think you already mentioned it. The Lions and Packers still play again, right?
Right.
Okay.
Green Bay hosts Minnesota, then they host Detroit. Detroit hosts the Bears and then goes to Green Bay.
Okay, so it is possible that is a play-in game for that 7th wild card spot with the Packers and the Lions. And then
I know the Packers have to win out to even be in it, so they got to beat the Vikes, but they're favored, and I can understand why.
Right now, looking at the South, with, let's say the Bucs collapsed and they don't win again, and they
host the Panthers this week. Like, to me, that's a monster game.
That's a huge game. And then there's a tiebreaker for the Panthers and the Saints, because we haven't talked a lot about the Saints. The Saints are also 6-9, just as the Carolina Panthers are.
That was an impressive win in Cleveland. I mean, that's not their environment, and they go up there and win that game.
I didn't expect that either. That was huge, and it was that the game that they said the feels like temperature was -37 or something.
It was the worst of all of them. Yes.
Like, what the hell? Like, how do you?
And the Browns did not handle it well, and that worries me for Watson, Amari, etc.
You know what I found funny this weekend was it was the Seahawks, and it was really cold in Kansas City as well. And DK Metcalf and some of the Seahawks players were warming up with no shirt on. And like, obviously DK Metcalf, if I looked like DK Metcalf, I probably would never wear a shirt
ever. Right.
But then they went and got
maybe I'll put something on. It's a little chilly out here.
They won the pregame. They won the pregame, but they did not win the actual game. But I did think that was funny. All right, look good before the game. But right now the Panthers win the tiebreak over New Orleans based on head-to-head win percentage. Do they play again?
Yes. So New Orleans goes to Philly, which, with or without Hurts, is a tough game. Plus, Philly owns their first-round pick, so that's not going to be easy on the Saints. Then they host the Panthers.
Okay,
so the Saints could be in trouble.
So the Saints could be in trouble, but they could also have a play-in, just like the Lions and the Packers, although it's for the South. But that would mean that they have to win both or the Panthers and Saints would both have to win next week. Then they would have to be waiting on the Panthers to lose in the last game of the season. But that could potentially be a play-in game as well.
So again, I don't have all the scenarios in front of me, but I'm looking at that division, and unfortunately, because I don't want to see the Bucs in the postseason, they have the 1-game lead. But they host the Panthers this week. If the Panthers win that game, which is very, very feasible, Tampa could go to Atlanta in week 18 and certainly lose, where Carolina could go to New Orleans and certainly win. So if Carolina wins out, they do a ton of damage to their opponents at Tampa, at New Orleans. So that's kind of a good feeling, but they probably need Tampa to lose both, which is possible.
Big one and they're in the AFC. There's a really big one for the Chargers at 8-6 that could this is a massive one for the Chargers if they beat the Colts Monday Night Football. It
feels like if they win, they're in.
Yeah, we're recording this before that game Monday, so we don't know the results of that depending on when you're watching this podcast. But it's basically a win and you're in type of a game for them to go 9-6 right now in the AFC playoffs with the Dolphins lost currently at 8-7, have a full game up there going into the last 2 weeks of the season.
They also host the Raiders and go to Denver. So it would be a massive collapse if the Chargers don't get hit.
Right. And so then it would be up to the Dolphins keeping their head above 500 and getting them in. It's a lot less likely for some of these AFC teams now with the Patriots, the Jets at 7-8, the Pittsburgh Steelers now at 7-8, but they do have a chance with their last second heroic win over the Las Vegas Raiders there. So not eliminated yet are some of these teams, including the Raiders, oddly enough, at 6-9, even though they are, for all intents and purposes, eliminated. They're not going to win. It would be pretty much impossible for them to find a way in with all these teams. Not impossible, but very close to that. And the Steelers are kind of in a similar boat. The interesting one here, though, to me, looking ahead, is it doesn't matter what the Titans and Jaguars do next week.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, they're playing for the title in week 18 with the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans. I think that's awesome.
So do you rest guys? You know what I mean? In week 17 to prepare for the playoff game in week 18?
Because the Jags, like a bye week?
Yeah. I mean, the Jags go to Houston and Tennessee hosts the Cowboys. If I'm the Titans, I mean, I'm playing Willis, but I might want my banged up dudes to get
think of both of those teams, if there's one player to rest, Derrick Henry would be that guy.
Yeah, great call. Right. I would not play Henry, period. End of sentence.
Do not play Henry. Right. And
maybe then, like a Jeffrey Simmons could get a break or somebody very important that's had a long year,
Or maybe play a half and then yank everybody if it's, if the game's out of hand or something like that too. I mean, you can't really quite yank everybody like you can in some other sports.
You could hide Trevor Lawrence's helmet in the second half.
That's true. I'd probably want to play Trevor Lawrence at least to start the game, treat it like week 3 of the preseason kind of thing. He plays a half, then you hide his helmet. But that'll be a fun one in week 18. Love that for the division. Doesn't matter.
We haven't had an 18-game schedule long, but I can't remember a year ever where the game before the last one didn't matter, but the last one did. I mean, it's so bizarre.
And looking at the AFC North, we talked about how the Steelers aren't out of it now at 7-8. Chippy end to the season.
Their tiebreakers are awful, though. They have so many AFC losses. That's what's killing the Steelers.
And it's amazing because the Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens have already clinched playoff spots, but we still don't know who's going to win that division yet. But Cincinnati Bengals do have the leg up there at 11-4 with the Baltimore Ravens now 10-5.
There's some talk. There's been a lot of rumors, and I hate talking rumors and speculation. And this guy said this: Lamar Jackson might not play again in the regular season.
And may never play again for the Ravens. Ever.
I mean, I'm sure he'll be there in the postseason, but
right. But there's then. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
He may not be a Raven next year. I'm just telling you that.
That is an offseason to watch very closely there in Baltimore for sure with Lamar Jackson. I hope everybody had a fantastic holiday season. Thanks so much for listening to Peacock and Williamson all year long. And of course, we will have a best of for you if you're listening to the audio podcast on Tuesday. It's also going to be on the YouTube channel as well. And of course, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled programs on Wednesday, which will be a mailbag. So if you have any questions about what's going on, Christmas football, about what's happened in the last couple of weeks of the season, or whatever it is about your football team, hit us up at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. We'll talk to you then right here, Peacock and Williamson.